Coming up, one of Kansas City's most iconic brands heading to California. A jury delivers its verdict, death for an anti-Semite who gunned down 3 people at 2 Jewish facilities in Overland Park. But will he ever be executed in Kansas? You've no doubt seen the ads. Right to work comes to a head as Missouri lawmakers head back to work for the annual veto session. We look at what's at stake on that issue, plus some other thorny questions they'll be deciding, from the minimum wage to giving college aid to the children of illegal immigrants. Plus, poor sportsmanship or the winner of the News Award for biggest overreaction to absolutely nothing. Those stories and more coming up. Hello, I'm Nick Haynes. Great to be with you again as we pour through the week's top stories with Scott Parks from 98.1 FM, KMBZ, pitch reporter Steve Vokrot, from the Kansas City Star reporter, columnist and blogger Dave Helling, and from the Star editorial board, Barbara Shelley. It's one of the few iconic brands left that claims Kansas City as its headquarters. Now it's heading out of town. America's favorite neighbor, Applebee's, moving its headquarters to Glendale, California. It's going to mean lots of job losses, but not everyone is unhappy. Some critics claim this is a company that has been the poster child of border battle tax breaks, moving multiple times in recent years just to get a tax advantage. The company moved from Kansas City, Missouri to Overland Park in '93, got more tax breaks to move to Lenexa in 2007, and was lured to 84th and Ward Parkway on the other side of State Line in 2011, aided in part by a more than $12 million incentive package from Kansas City and the state of Missouri. So why is Applebee's moving now? Did the tax breaks run out, Steve Vokrot?
They were getting ready to, because the tax incentive that they got would last for 5 years. They were about a little more than 4 years into their move, so the timing is pretty interesting. They also were acquired by a larger concern, and so the Applebee's headquarters, such as it is, was going to move to where the parent company is.
And that larger concern also owns IHOP, so
Correct.
they're going to be next to the kitchens of IHOP and all of the marketing of IHOP, and they're all going to be right together in California.
More like the suits of both organizations will be closer together. But you know, Applebee's was an employer that was diminishing over time. When they moved from Lenexa to Kansas City and got all those incentives, you know, they always like to tout incentives as a means to grow jobs. They had about 380 employees when they moved to Kansas City, and now it's down to about 220. They're going to cut 100, leave a few people behind.
We may say diminishing in terms of jobs, but this is a chain with 2,000 restaurants across the country. And in Kansas City, you know, we have H&R Block, we have Hallmark, and we could say they are ours, but AMC is now owned by a Chinese company, Sprint, now has ownership from a Japanese cell phone company. Even Boulevard went Belgian not so long ago, Scott. Does it make a difference that Applebee's is now moving out of Kansas City?
Maybe to a slight extent, just on the psychological impact of us as a city. And you know, I've always struggled with why Kansas City feels like it's an ugly stepchild to every other city in the country, most importantly, St. Louis. Does this mean people are not going to go eat at Applebee's? Probably not. You know, there was a big, no pun intended, brouhaha when Boulevard was bought out by the Belgian company, but I don't see people not drinking Boulevard anymore. You know, there's not a protest. When you're at a bar, people don't say, well, I'm not drinking Boulevard because, you know, they're owned by a Belgian company. It's still made here. And I think people, by and large, still see Boulevard as a Kansas City company, not unlike they see Sprint as a Kansas City company, even though technically it's not. The psychological impact might be slight, but I don't think it's going to make much of a difference.
Barbara, is there another impact to this? I mean, some people saying this week, oh, good riddance, because they were just playing one city after another here for tax breaks.
Well, you're going to have about 100 people losing their jobs. You're going to have I think there's some concern about that building now in Ward Parkway and what's going to happen to that. But, you know, I would like to think, although I'm not really optimistic, that people will take note and say, you know, this border war is really stupid. I mean, the area gained nothing from giving Applebee's all these incentives to move all over the place.
Do you think, though, that that's a symbolic difference, though, Dave? People say, oh, that border war now is, we need to do something about that? Because I never see anything really happen with that.
Well, I think the border war will continue, but I think Barbara's exactly right that there is a message sent by this decision, which is that tax policy isn't always the determinant for corporate relocation decisions. This company is moving from Kansas or Missouri, whatever, Kansas City area, to California. And they're doing so for a reason that Steve talked about, that they, and you talked about, they can be together with the IHOP people and sort of consolidate their operations. That makes sense. Tax policy had very little to do with it. And if Kansas and Missouri officials are watching, they'll understand that relocation decisions consider taxation, but make moves for all sorts of different reasons unrelated to that policy.
Right, and you know, there's a recognition that the border war tax breaks are wasteful in terms of dollars and cents. I think Sly James even made that remark this week in the context of the Applebee's move. But you have to remember that when the opportunity is right in front of these politicians, including Sly James, when he personally recruited Freight Quote to move from Lenexa to a new office building along 435, the temptation's too hard to give up, and that's why I don't see the border war ending perhaps anytime soon.
In other news this week, after a 2-week trial in Johnson County, a jury says an anti-Semite who gunned down 3 people outside the Jewish Community Center and the Village Shalom retirement facility in Overland Park should be put to death. The judge will consider the jury's recommended sentence. That hearing is set for November. How could it be, though, that a jury listens to all the evidence, deliberates, and then they can only recommend the death penalty? Can the judge in this case deny that jury's decision?
I actually read the statute yesterday to make sure I understood how it works in Kansas. Different provisions in different states, but in Kansas the statute says that the jury reaches a decision and then the judge decides if the evidence supports that decision. And if the evidence supports the decision of the jury, then he or she can impose the death penalty. If not, life without parole is the option.
But the state of Kansas, Scott, has not put to death anyone since June of 1965, when the last inmate, George York, was hung from the gallows at Kansas State Penitentiary in Lansing.
In my hometown.
There we go. So, so what are the chances that even if the judge in this case then says, yes, we're going to go with the jury's recommendation, the sentence is death, that Frazier Glenn Cross, at the age of 74, will meet an executioner?
In a word, zero. There's 0% chance that he will. He has a chronic illness. He will die in prison within the next 5 years. And good. However, I do think, and I won't name names, I don't want to upset a couple of people here on the panel because they work with him, but there was a very prominent newspaper writer who argued against giving Frazier Cross the death penalty because it would create a martyrdom kind of situation around him. The death penalty in this case is not to put Frazier Cross to death, it's to send a message that if anyone else who might think he's onto something here with killing Jewish people, even though he never did, this is what's going to happen to you. This was not a death sentence. This was a message to anybody else who wants to try to do something like this. This will be your ultimate fate. Hate leads to this. And he'll die in prison. There's no way. I mean, Johnny Robinson, for God's sakes, is still drawing breath in the Kansas penal system.
So, but why is that? You know, you have the state of Missouri, which really, I think, has been on track over the last 3 years to do 1 execution every month. It's sort of close to Texas in being one of the most execution-happy states in the nation. Why are they so reluctant in Kansas to, you know, in 50 years, and we've had the reinstatement of the death penalty since 1994, to execute anyone, and yet in Missouri it seems that that is not an issue whatsoever? Well,
I think part of it's just cultural. I think Kansas has always been more squeamish about the death penalty than Missouri. Its death penalty statute is much more limited than Missouri as far as what conditions can be imposed. And the other thing is, executions cost money, and Kansas doesn't have any money. It's broke.
Is it all about the money, Steve?
Well, it's about the appeals process, which, you know, if you just look at it as, you know, in 1994 they reinstate the death penalty, and say somebody gets the death penalty that year, there are cases all over the country of people staying on death row for 20, 30 years because the appeals process is the way it is, and rightfully so, because, you know, the appeals process is set up to avoid having somebody be wrongfully executed.
It costs as much in Missouri as it does in Kansas, presumably. Why are they not so unwilling to execute people, Dave?
Well, in part because Missouri's appeal process it goes back farther than the one in Kansas. But Kansas is, you know, more reluctant to execute people than most other states, not just Missouri. Since the death penalty was reinstated, only 2 states have reinstated the death penalty and not used it. Kansas is one of those states, New Hampshire is the other. And I think that's a product, as some suggest, of the culture, which is kind of anti-death penalty anyway in some ways in Kansas. But also, Governor Brownback, let's just be clear, is a little bit ambivalent about the use of the death penalty, and so he hasn't pushed it aggressively. And the Kansas Supreme Court is skeptical, or has been skeptical in the past, of the ultimate sanction. So you put all of that stuff together, it lessens the momentum to put people to death in the state.
I would only add to this, and I'm sympathetic to Steve's point. For those of us who do support limited use of the death penalty, the idea that someone who is actually innocent might be put to death is excruciatingly painful just to think about for those of us who do support the death penalty. However, my co-host and I on the radio like to use what we call the Dana and Parks method to the death penalty. If we know, you go. We know with Johnny Robinson. And for those of us who support limited use of the death penalty, this 20 to 30 year wait on death row is frustrating as all get out. And when you have someone like Johnny Robinson, and I just keep going back to that because he's the most obvious on
and he's the man who's putting the women into barrels filled with cement.
Put at least 6 women in 3 in Kansas, 3 in Missouri. 6 women in barrels, liquefied their remains. We know he did this. There's no question that he did this. Why 15 years after he was arrested is he still alive? And that is frustrating for us.
If you thought you didn't have to worry about state legislative politics until lawmakers return to their respective state capitals in January, think again. Next week, Missouri lawmakers head back to Jefferson City for a veto session. And there are some pretty sizable issues at stake, from right to work, the minimum wage, to whether the children of illegal immigrants should get in-state tuition and state scholarship money for their education. Let's start with right to work, where both sides have been waging an ad war to get your attention.
Missouri workers need right to work. 3.6 million new jobs were created in right-to-work states. Let's bring those new jobs to Missouri. On September 16th, legislators can reject Governor Nixon's veto of this bill.
Out-of-state corporations want a so-called right-to-work law, allowing them to slash wages and even criminalizing Missouri small businesses who hire union workers. Telling businesses who they can and can't hire and what they should pay is an outrageous act of government overreach.
Okay, you get it now. You've weighed it all up in your mind. What is the right to work anyway, and what does all of this mean, and what are lawmakers actually deciding next week?
Okay, well, right to work, what they'll be deciding is whether in Missouri, if your workplace is unionized and you don't want to join a union, should you have to pay a fee for union representation because, of course, you benefit from it. It's a big, hot issue nationwide. It is being driven by some, the free market corporate-funded interest groups. They go from state to state. Basically they want all states to have right-to-work laws. On the flip side, the argument for it is that, workers shouldn't have to pay for an organization they choose not to be in. The flip side is they do get benefits from it. And in fact, obviously, if it pass right to work, unions will have less money. And they won't be able to do a lot of the things they do, apprenticeship programs, economic development, things like that.
So the Missouri legislature has already passed a right to work law.
Right.
The governor vetoed it, and now it would be an opportunity to overturn that. But what difference would it make then if this actually became the law of the state of Missouri? Will we see all of those millions of jobs coming to Kansas City, as we just saw, and to other cities across our great state of Missouri, as we just saw in that ad, Steve?
Not for that by itself. I mean, this is, let's cut to the chase. I mean, this is a political issue. Labor unions tend to be very democratic. Missouri legislature is growing increasingly conservative. That's what you're seeing going on right here with this veto session.
On a practical basis, what difference would it make if there was a right-to-work law in the state of Missouri?
Well, there's a right-to-work law in Kansas, for example, and it means that if you go to work in Kansas and there's a union that represents the workers in that particular place, you don't have to join the union. You have a right to work without it. And it hasn't completely destroyed, I mean, it's hard to sort of tease out what impact it's had in Kansas and other states. But you know, the tension between sort of business and labor is a long story in this country. It goes back 100 years or more, including in Missouri. And the irony of all of this is that unions are doing a pretty good job of going away on their own. Union representation in this country is dwindling dramatically. Missouri is not an exception to that because of the changing nature of the workforce. So in some ways, this battle over right to work and the veto of right to work is a throwback to 20 or 30 years ago when union representation had a bigger role in our politics. It's almost arguably irrelevant now, Nick, to the current state of employment in the state of Missouri.
Well, that's just one of the issues up for grabs next week. Setting once and for all whether cities can impose their own minimum wage laws is also on the agenda. Kansas City just enacted a $13 an hour law. That's in limbo. So are two ballot measures heading for a November ballot in the city. One to hike the wage to $15, another to rescind the $13 an hour law. So what will lawmakers be deciding on that next week?
It's Bill 722, I think it's House Bill 722, that has a bunch of different things in it, and it is extraordinarily poorly drafted because the impact on the minimum wage in Kansas City and in St. Louis is not completely clear. There is other legislative language that prohibits the cities from establishing their own minimum wages. So this bill, the main focus of the bill is prohibiting cities from prohibiting the use of plastic bags at grocery stores.
That's right.
And so it's really also about politics, Nick, in some ways, and that is who gets to decide what happens in cities. City councils, city commissions, or does the state legislature
So regardless of what happened in Kansas City, where voters wanted to put a minimum wage issue on the ballot, and those efforts in November, all of that could be moot based on what happens in Missouri next week?
It very well could, yes.
Okay. But may not be, because the language is so poorly drafted and how it interfaces with what Kansas City is doing and not doing. Believe me, the courts are going to have to sort it out, or VACRA, one of the two.
Well, in Kansas City, officials have already acknowledged to some extent already, even without this veto session, that it's not even clear whether they can.
I don't see an appetite in Kansas City to go to the bat with the legislature on this if they overturn Nixon's veto.
Well, lawmakers are also wading into the immigration issue, asking should the children of illegal immigrants living in Missouri get in-state tuition and be entitled to state scholarship money for their education. Any question on immigration can be incredibly polarizing. But let's start with the facts. How many people are we really talking about here who are affected by this?
I believe it's a pretty small handful. I think one of the reports I read suggested that there are more legislators discussing this than actual people that this might affect.
We should be clear what this is. These are children of people who came here illegally, brought here illegally, but came with their families, so really had no choice in the matter, and the state law now allows them to qualify for scholarships at schools if they meet certain stringent criteria. And some lawmakers, because of the nationalization of the immigration issue, Nick, have wanted to cut that stream of funding off.
And while we think about this as a sort of partisan issue, there are many Democrats who are actually supportive of cutting off that aid to children.
Well, we'll see.
Including Jason Holzman, who voted for the original bill in the state of Missouri, who's from Kansas.
Right. The argument of those who want to cut off this funding is that providing it is an incentive or sends a message, if you will, to other families that, hey, if you come here, your children will be entitled to benefits. They also argue that there isn't enough money even for people who are legally here. We'll see if those arguments play out in Jeff City.
This argument that, this will encourage more, high-performing high school kids to locate in Missouri so they can go to college. I don't think that's all that bad.
We always have to keep in mind, Nick, just briefly, contemporary politics is about symbols. It's not really about actual legislation. It's about messages. You know, there aren't enough people in this fight to make it mean much one way or the other in terms of state finances, but it sends enormous symbolic messages to constituencies in both parties. That's why we're pursuing this. That's why right to work is an issue. I mean, you just go down the list. All the votes in state, and we've talked about this on the show repeatedly, votes in state legislatures now are almost all about symbols and not the reality of things on the ground.
But while it may be symbolic, I mean, certainly at the presidential level, this immigration question has been a huge one.
Oh, without a doubt. And as somebody who certainly identifies right of center, it's frustrating for me to watch how, especially Republicans, have dealt with the issue of immigration. And to Dave's point previously, these are kids who were brought here by their parents. It's not as if, you know, there was a vote at the House back in Mexico or whatever country they came from where, you know, Mom, I think I'm going to stay here. I mean, what do we want to do? Continually keep these people uneducated? These people that come from other countries illegally, to keep them uneducated? And they're known as dreamers. I mean, let's not.
Yes, but the advocates of this, though, would argue that no, you can still go to college. We're just not going to subsidize giving you a benefit that even other citizens of the United States are not entitled to.
And I understand that. But have they earned the benefit that we're talking about? Again, while they are technically illegal, did they really break the law? Or did their parents break the law for them? And I think that's what, as people who are right of center, who by the way, are going to desperately need the Hispanic vote in the next couple of years, is this the message we want to send to the fastest growing minority group in America? And I think the answer is no.
All of those issues then being decided next week in the Missouri legislature in that veto session. This week, the Kansas City Royals break their all-time attendance record, more people going through the turnstiles than in any year in the team's history. But that wasn't the local sports story bringing the most national attention to KC. That belongs to this one. Find over phallic-looking starship. That was a headline in one of the main Arizona newspapers this week. It was a story that was the #1 trending story on the Kansas City Star's website and even captured British news coverage. I am talking about Kansas State University and its marching band, which is fined $5,000, and its band director suspended for a game because of a formation featuring band members who took on the shape of a KU Jayhawk, while the rest of the marching Wildcats formed the Starship Enterprise and began prodding the KU mascot in the mouth. Lawmakers are now wading into the controversy. A Republican state representative from Salina tweeting, "What a steaming pile of crap," so to speak. How about we sit quietly in the stands for fear of offending a bunch of panty waists? Well, I mean, would we see now lawmakers now remove funding from K-State University? They've done things like that before, Barbara.
Well, they've threatened to do things like that before, but no, I think they'll stay out of this one.
Is this an unsportsmanlike pursuit, Scott?
As somebody who went to the universities of Nebraska and Kansas, I hope my fellow KU graduates will forgive me, but I thought it was kind of funny. Unsportsmanlike, maybe to an extent. I'm not exactly sure what the point was of a Jayhawk eating the Starship Enterprise, other than to send the message that I think doesn't need to be said here at this table, not on public television. However, I thought while it was sophomoric and juvenile, it was funny. And I think the punishment, the $5,000 fine or whatever it was, and the suspension, and keep in mind the band director, by the way, is suspended for their game in Lawrence. I don't think the K-State band actually plays in Memorial Stadium in Lawrence when they come to visit. However, it was goofy, it was juvenile, it was dumb, but it was funny. I say that from afar. If I had a 7-year-old kid in the stands, I don't know how I would feel.
And I'll tell you what I think is taking political correctness too far is now this band director has to have his formations approved by a committee, and I just think that's a little much.
Well, the Salina newspaper this week says, already our vote for the biggest overreaction in the absolutely nothing to it category goes to anyone who was offended by the Kansas State University Marching Band's halftime performance. Is there another story competing in that category this year, Steve?
Is the biggest overreaction? I don't know. This one's pretty high up there so far.
I tried to think of one, and I couldn't.
Okay, Dave?
Yeah, amazing that a state legislator would refer to a steaming pile of crap, however, given the performance of the legislature this year. Perhaps someone should look closely in the mirror before making statements like that.
Will outrage over this incident threaten enrollment at K-State? According to a new report out this week, a lot of Kansas high schoolers aren't even qualified to attend any college.
By no means do I want to say that we're satisfied with where we are right now. We're not satisfied.
A new state report making a new splash around the state says that a majority of Kansas public school students aren't on track to be ready for college based on their scores on standardized English and math tests. On average, 42% of students scored well enough on the English tests to be considered on track to be ready for college. On math tests, the figure was only 34%. What are we supposed to read into this, Barbara?
Well, they switched the tests. They went to a test aligned with the Common Core standards, which are pretty rigorous and are meant to get kids college ready. And if you talk to people at the Kansas universities, they do have a lot of freshmen that don't complete their freshman year or move on after that. And it does have to do with this issue of preparedness. So it doesn't mean that Kansas school kids have gotten any dumber or anything like that. It's a different, more rigorous test.
Now, the governor and the Republican leaders in the legislature insist it's not because of lack of funding after our show 2 weeks ago where it was stated that funding for schools is going down. Not true, Senator Jeff Melcher, a Leawood Republican, wanted to make sure our audience was informed. About 50% of every dollar in the general fund budget goes to schools. When you break that out, that's about $12,000 a year. That was in 2010. It's gone up since, $13,000 roughly this school year. Meanwhile, the governor made it clear to us that Shawnee Mission just broke ground on 6 new buildings. Tonganoxie just started the school year with a new state-of-the-art facility. And some school districts, including Topeka, are increasing teacher pay. So if, as the governor and Senator Melcher point out, it's not about money, what is it about, Dave?
Well, it's about the state budget deficit and the court case and the real, we just talked about the symbolism in state legislatures. Next year, the battle over school funding will not be symbolic, it'll be very real. But I do think, Nick, that one of the things we might miss in our area is we tend to focus on Shawnee Mission or Blue Valley or even Kansas City, Kansas, sort of more urban districts, Wichita. The real crisis in Kansas is in rural districts where the overhead is very high, where funding is diminishing because of property tax and because it's hard to recruit good teachers to those districts. That's what the problem is.
And I would love to add you, Scott, but that is all the time we have on this week's program. I'm Nick Haynes from all of us at KCPT. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.